Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. I'm fascinated with people who are helping build and maintain the physical world around us. On each episode of this podcast, we'll dive in with a risk manager, speak to them about how technology plays a role in this process.
Laura, thank you for joining me today on Brick by Brick. I appreciate you. I know that you're pretty busy at ITC.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I know that you're one of the presenters at ITC, so let's walk through what were you presenting about and how was that received?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was on a panel yesterday presenting on externalized rating and underwriting. So
Okay.
what that means is if you're selling insurance, for example, you've got a policy admin system. Sometimes your rating might be like in the middle of the policy admin system.
Yeah.
Externalized rating is all about pulling that outside of your policy admin system, keeping it separate so that you don't have to go through massive IT changes, for example, when you want to change your prices, change your underwriting, and lets you have a lot more agility. So yeah, it was a good topic. We were in a panel. I was joined by some of my colleagues and also Chetan from Chubb.
Yeah.
And it was great to just talk about that and how it's impacting the industry.
And from your perspective, what has the impact of the industry been?
What we see is too often we have like a pricing team, for example, they've built their rate proposal, they know what they want to charge, and they've got all their sign-offs and approvals, and then they have to like copy and paste it into Excel and then send it over to IT, and IT has to rebuild it all, and it takes a really long time. It's really slow.
Right.
It's really error-prone.
Yes.
I don't want errors in pricing. That's a really bad thing.
Yeah, right.
And I definitely don't want to be slow because in the market that we're in, we need to be able to respond quickly. And so what we're seeing is when people externalize that rating, it means that they're able to now like respond to market quickly, get rates out to market fast, massively reduce the number of errors, and be able to deploy more sophistication.
What does an organization need to be able to externalize that?
Yeah, so part of it's technology, right? So at WTW we have technology called Reichl, which is part of being able to externalize it. That's a really critical part. But for me, one of the interesting things being at ITC is we're all going to talk about technology, but also everything that goes around the execution of that technology is so important, right? You buy a tool and not use it very effectively. And so you also need to think about the change management around it. How's this going to change my processes? How does it change what my people do day to day? And so it's both of those. It's technology, but it's also process and governance and people that go around it.
I think that in the last few years, I've just seen the entire industry sort of pick up on technologies and start moving really quickly. You know, historically, insurance is not known for being fast to adopt things, but I find it to be a different moment in time right now around how people are approaching technology and looking at that. Is that similar to what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's more urgency than ever before. I think it's been a tough couple of years in personal lines. Anyone can look at the results and see that. I think people are seeing, okay, I have to do things differently. I have to move faster, and technology is going to enable that. I need to be doing things differently.
One of the things that you talk a lot about is data intelligence within the context of personal lines. So when we talk about data intelligence, obviously pricing intelligence is part of that.
Yeah.
But what else is part of the big term data intelligence?
Yeah, so pricing is part of that. And when we talk about pricing, it's also not just like I need to build a pricing model, for example.
Yeah, right.
It's also like everything that goes around that. Like I should be using data to be able to manage my portfolio, to be able to, I should know what business I wrote yesterday and whether I think it's going to be profitable or not.
Right.
So it's much more about, I think in the past we've had these really linear processes that take a long time, and I start looking at my data.
Everything's about enrichment, right?
Yeah. Whereas now I think it's much more, actually I need an ongoing cycle. I need to be constantly looking at data. So it's true in the context of pricing and managing my portfolio, but also underwriting. Claims is an area where we massively increase use of data to build models, for example, and understand what I'm expecting to happen with a claim that comes in.
Yeah, when we're talking about models for claims, how do you view like AI models sitting on top of that to actually go through claim data and find the things that a claim adjuster might not be able to see right away, right?
Yeah, so absolutely we're seeing a lot of that. So there's pieces around large language models, for example, around the use of data that is just too difficult to get out of notes otherwise. Right now, all of a sudden we can get things out of claims adjuster notes. That's really valuable. Where we're seeing a huge amount of potential for uplift is in things like machine learning.
Yeah.
So things like, if I'm on a call with their client or they've gone onto my website to do a claim, for example, I should be able to use models to like instantly go, yeah, this looks like a legitimate claim, we should pay it, or you know what, this has the potential for larger, it's the potential for litigation, it's the potential for fraud, and are treated differently. We can use algorithms and AI and machine learning to be able to just be way more effective at that and essentially help the claims handler do their job more effectively.
Yeah, one of the common things that I'm hearing over and over and over again is insurance, every organization for the last 20 years went through a data collection process, and now we're just in the phase of what can this actually do for us now that we've been collecting this. Everybody thought that was because I'm seeing stuff from space theme, it keeps coming with like, that's how we're going to get to the moon, is like collect all this data. And now people are like, okay, now we're on the moon, how are we going to actually colonize it? How are we going to actually make this work for us?
Yeah, exactly. So we do surveys where we ask insurers around like, how are you using data, how are you using analytics? We do them every couple of years. We did one like 3 years ago, and then we did one at the start of this year. When you look at it, like the ambition is there, right? Everybody is like, yeah, I want to use data and analytics. I'm absolutely going to use it. It's going to transform my business. When you look at what people were actually doing with it between those 2 years, barely moved the needle, right? So people want to do it, but they're not actually finding ways to execute on it. So for us, like a lot of the work is, it's not like, can you build a clever model? It's, can you execute on it and use it? And that I think is going to be the key to unlocking value.
Well, this goes into my question about, as head of personal lines, what are your primary goals for the next year for your organization? Where do you see things going that you're trying to lead the market to?
So I already mentioned externalized rating. We're definitely working with carriers a lot around that. We absolutely see carriers who've said, okay, I've done my big policy admin system transformation, for example. We partner with many of the policy admin
Now we
want
to start to get use of it.
Now we want to get use out of it. Now I want to actually be able to be faster around rating, around underwriting, around decision making. And so we're definitely working with carriers in that space. Absolutely see the execution of data and analytics is key. And so we have technology and we work with carriers around that, but we also have a broader consulting piece of work that goes along with that, right? Around saying, let's say your data scientist build a brilliant model. How are you going to actually use that in your organization? How are you going to get your front line to use that? Is it solving the right business problem to start with, right? When we do these surveys, one of the key things that comes up is my data scientists, my actuaries, my analysts don't know how to talk to the business and vice versa. So like building that connection so we solve the right business problems, I think is key.
Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, we could say that's always been what the problem is, right? So what is unique about right now that you think that this isn't just a talk track, it's something that people should really be doing?
So I think what we saw over the last, let's say 5, maybe 10 years is pretty much every insurance company saying data and analytics matters. Actually wasn't really true at the start of my career. Some would say it, some didn't, right? And now like we've seen that, like it's really rare you talk to an insurer who says, I don't care about data, right? Like everyone gets it, everyone knows it's important. So that's changed. Then you got this trend like 5-10 years ago, like I'm going to hire 100 data scientists in my organization. Right? And so they did that. They put in the investment, like you go to your board and say like, we need to invest in data and analytics. It's really important. And go, it's really important. We invest in it. I think now is that realization of, okay, how do I make it effective? How do I actually use this? I think that's what's changed is people going, okay, I've got to tie this to business problems.
So when I'm thinking about data intelligence and it's important for a business, like our audience is primarily risk managers who work within a business, right? That's who's listening to this podcast, watching it. How do they actually use this to make the lives of their customers better? How do they use it to transform what risk looks like going forward? Like, how does it actually play? Because I know you're working like business to business. That's like management consulting, business to business. But how does it actually affect everybody on the tail end of the process?
Yeah, great question. And so I am like business to business now, but for a long time I was on the carrier side. And so often thinking about, okay, how does this apply to the customer? And I think there are brilliant ways where using data and analytics better can help the customer. So like real examples, if I'm filling in a quote, for example, I'd like to not answer like 100 questions. I'd like you to be able to, use external data to fill in these questions so that it makes my life easier as I do the process. If I am claiming and it's like clearly legitimate claim, clearly
just let me
covered, like just pay me, right? Like I shouldn't have to go through like 20 hurdles. So let's make that process better for that customer so we do it faster.
Have you actually seen, like this is just because of your background and being part of it, is that if you know you're going to pay the claim, if you pay it faster and sooner, that does a lot for retention with your customer. It does a lot for how they view your relationship with their insured.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And if you have a good claim experience, you go and tell a whole bunch of people about it too, right? I had this, like often, it depends on the claim, right? But sometimes those claims are pretty traumatic, right? Like my house burned down, right? Like mine didn't, but imagine your house burned down. If your insurer deals really well with that, you're going to go tell people about that. And it's in those, I think, like those moments of truth that it really comes through.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the reasons we started the podcast is because there was a talent gap in getting young people interested in thinking that this is a cool career, right? And one of the things that I want to do is, for a professional like you, why should someone pay attention to the insurance industry? Why should they want to work in it? And what's exciting for them in their career?
And you're right, like people hear the word insurance and like they're ready to yawn, right? I think I've been in this industry for quite a long time. I think it's a great, exciting industry, and for a couple of reasons. One, like from a technical perspective, from what you do data, like we have tons of data. We can do really interesting stuff. There are interesting applications of Gen AI happening every day, for example, in our industry. Like, that stuff is interesting and fun, and to get to be part of that, I think is great. And so if you're a brilliant data scientist, for example, like what a fun thing to go and do and have all this access to data. The other thing though is I think what we do is really important, right? It really matters. Whether your house has burned down, for example, like I need to know that there's insurance. Like insurance really lets a lot of things happen in society and is critical, and we've seen that in some of the
in personal lines,
catastrophes, right?
No one even wants to have to be dealing with the situation that they're probably dealing with at that point.
So it's life-changing, and so I think what we do matters, and so I think that's a great industry to be part of.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us. Head over to TrustLayer.io. And then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.